And comprehensibility is really just making your instruction and materials and the world around your students understandable to them. This applies for all levels of English proficiency, but it's extremely important, as you know, for the lower proficiency levels. Your newcomers, your new to English students who are still looking around, watching others, trying to figure out what's going on. So great comprehensibility strategies include buddying students up. If you have a student who's a great buddy, a great partner, a great mentor, and then make sure they sit next to each other, one that doesn't mind pointing somebody in the right direction. A student who, even if they're shy and they don't really think you're going to reach out a lot and help, maybe they're just a great model that if I'm the English learner and I'm looking to the sides of me to be like, what are we doing right now? Then I know at least on each side of me, there's somebody who's doing the right thing. So put those people next to your students. If they have the same native language, same first language, even better, but not a necessity, because honestly, kids find a way to communicate with each other and they figure it out. And sometimes we're left going, didn't I say the same thing? And they understood when they talked to each other. Adding visuals into any kind of teaching, whether you are sitting in front of a class or standing in front of the class and you have pictures in a chart stand or one of those sentence strip, chart holders, whether you make an anchor chart with pictures, if you have PowerPoint slides or Flipgrid or whatever it is that you do to provide students with visuals and pictures along the way, hands-on and manipulatives. So things like project-based learning, group problem solving, having those materials on hand in math so that students can touch and feel. Same thing with science. Instead of explaining, if you're demonstrating anything, model, model, model. I know you've heard that from me a few times over a lot of different things, but really you are the native English speaking model in your classroom. You are the academic language speaking model in your classroom. You may have a lot of students who are native English speakers, but none of them have the academic language proficiency that you have. So your modeling is going to be super crucial. And that's where I want you to put your thought and your planning so that you can really target that modeling. And while you're demonstrating your science concept or your math process or whatever it is, finding, the evidence in your text, that you are very conscious of the language you want them to use while they are talking about your content. So it's not a big add-on, it's just something that I want you to think about when you are planning, because you can really knock out two things at once. So anytime you can think, okay, so for this science concept, I'm going to need them to know this vocabulary. I want them to talk about it in sentences and eventually paragraphs. So what's that going to sound like? Let me model what I want it to be. You'll get better content answers and you'll be developing language at the same time. So I'm pretty positive you already do a lot of this. It's just now making it more conscious so that you can be more targeted and explicit. So I want to show you some tweaks on two different strategies that I know folks out there are using. I'm going to show you some tweaks for the best practice of reviewing your objectives at the beginning, of a lesson, during a lesson, at the end of a lesson. That's an established best practice required by many principals across the country. So how do you take that opportunity? Because most of us usually see that as, I do it for an observation because I know they expect it. but most of the time I kind of just gloss over it or I skip it because I want to jump right in. So I'm going to show you how you can take that opportunity and really make it into a warm-up that generates background knowledge for your content while also generating the language students are going to need. So I'm going to show you a clip of that. The second strategy I want to highlight for you is word walls, using a word wall. I know that it's very commonplace, but don't stop listening. How can you take your word wall and upgrade it, right? Because we remember in this challenge, we're focusing on things we already do and upgrading. So how can you take your word wall that in many cases just gets neglected and ignored and upgrade it to be a language development tool as it is also a concept development tool? And it becomes a scaffold for your students to refer to and support them as they are working with their peers and listening to you and processing content. It becomes a valuable resource in your room. Here are some clips for you.
Today I want to share a quick strategy with you that we call messy objectives. There's a couple different names for it out there in the field, but this is our version and how we like to do it. Now, the point of messy objectives is to make sure at the start of your lesson that you not only go over your lesson objective or outcome with students, but that you really talk about it and make sure students truly understand what they are supposed to learn and be able to do by the end of your lesson. So I have some objectives here that we used in our lesson planning project, and I want to show you the messy objective strategy using these. So the first thing I would do would be to read my objective with the students. So I can write a narrative based on an image. So if you participated in our 5-day lesson challenge, you know that this was an arts integration strategy. If you haven't, go to the free training section and look up that 5-day lesson challenge and you'll learn all about that. But we were going through a 5-step process of using an image to create a narrative as an arts integration strategy, beginning, middle, end. And in that, I want students to really understand I can write a narrative based on an image. I want my objective to have the academic language. I could say I can write a story about a picture, but that's not as sophisticated and academic as I want my students to be producing right now. So we're going to present it in an academic way and break it down and make sure they really understand it. I can write a narrative. I can write. All right, if we're writing, what are we doing? And then I want to call out my thinking verbs. So I'm going to focus on the thinking verb of create. So I can create a narrative, right? I can write a narrative. I can create a narrative. And for my lowest English proficiency students, my beginners, I might put an image here. All right, here we have a pencil. Right? I can create, I can write a narrative, and I want to model that. I want to gesture for my beginners. I can write a narrative. So what's a narrative? And we have that conversation. Obviously, if this lesson we're writing a narrative, we've been talking about narratives for a little while. They should recognize that word and know what that means. This isn't the first time they're hearing it. So a narrative, I would imagine, what's a narrative? What do you remember about a narrative? I imagine the students would be saying a story, something like that. I can create a story. I can write a narrative. So we're just restating using different kinds of academic language based on an image. What does it mean when we say based on? Like this movie was based on the book, or you think the answer to this math problem is 12 based on your understanding of multiplication. What does it mean when we say based on? Right? Give some examples. Based on means it's about something. we're going to write a narrative based on an image. An image, right? What's another word for image? An image is a picture. And I'll put something here as an example, a visual, maybe, even though cameras don't look like this anymore. Yeah. This picture of a camera, so they say an image. So with what I've added to the objective now, my beginning English speakers, even if they're not completely comprehending what we're doing today, they're getting the gist. They know we're going to write, and they may not get the whole story about part, but they get that we're going to write something and it's going to be about a picture. So in their minds, I can see okay, we're going to write about a picture. The details now for more advanced students, you're getting in the vocabulary of create and narrative and based on an image, really upping the language there. Then this is left for the lesson, and at the end of the lesson, we come back to it. I can write a narrative based on an image. I can create a story about the picture. Did we do that? Did we create a story? Did we create a narrative? Repetition, repetition, repetition of that academic language.
So developing that word level. The supports you can give students to develop that level are interactive word walls. I loved this example. Doesn't look like all the words in a row. This you can tell is student created. There are pictures and labels, and there are pictures that mean something to the students. So they are more likely to remember them. Now, the key with the word wall is not just to make a pretty bulletin board, and that was one activity where we talked about vocabulary, we created our word wall, and then the next day, life goes on. When you are working on your writing then, and you are choosing today to focus on word level, when a student writes something, you need to be saying things like, I want you to be checking the word wall. What words from the word wall can you incorporate in your writing? I want to see some of these words appear. And then when you sit down in conference with a student or edit writing together, or they partner talk to your partner, look at the word wall. Where is a place that you could add some of these word wall words into your writing? Right? Make it interactive, make it a tool. If that word is important enough to put on the word wall, then that word needs to show up in your writing or your speaking. When you're talking to your partner about the light energy, make sure you're using words from our word wall. I want to hear those words. I've been in classrooms where the students get tally marks. They get points each time they use one of the target words, whether it's math or science. And that helps bring attention to raising up the level of vocabulary. I liked this word wall, the properties of matter word wall, because it had, I like the ones like rough, smooth, bend, sparkles, because there are objects tacked to it, or like the wiggly eyes or the squishy cotton ball. These are bringing words to life and using real objects instead of just a straight list of words on the word wall. And again, in conversation and then in writing, I'm encouraging students and saying, when you're describing your matter sample, what's in front of you, I want to hear these words. When you write your explanation, I want to see these words. You give feedback around vocabulary. And then in the editing process, how can we go back and replace this description, add some more spark, add some more interest. Welcome back to me. I hope you saw in those clips that with just a few tweaks, and you can start very small and add to it as you have more time and you get more comfortable. There's a wide range of starting small and then building and building and building your expertise to make it better and better as you go.